Welcome to the Magna AI podcast, where we sit down with principals, district leaders, and instructional innovators who are reshaping what's possible in the classroom with a little help from AI. Together, we explore how school leaders are using smart tools and bold ideas to support teachers, personalize learning, and improve outcomes for every student. Hello. Today we have Patrick Keating with us, who is a seasoned educational leader and has been gone through a journey of teaching as well as leadership roles at different institutions. And Patrick will be talking to us about what are some of the challenges that today's institutions face and how his leadership is actually helping address those challenges. So welcome, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sarvesh.
Great. So Patrick, do you want to talk a little bit about your journey, what inspired you to come into education, and how your role has transformed from a teacher to an educator?
Yeah, when I was in high school, I did a lot of volunteering with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and especially when I was a junior in high school, we had required service hours, and I became a big brother to a third grader and then his fourth grade friend, and began working with them a lot. And I always had I'm the son of a lifelong educator, and she really instilled that in me. But I never thought I'd be a teacher, and then that experience through Big Brothers Big Sisters, coupled with at that time, junior year of high school, you're trying to figure out like, where am I interested in going to school and what do you want to do? My history teacher at the time, Mr. Rains, suggested, hey, you should look into education. And after a lot of thought, a lot of prayer, I decided to major in social studies education, and I went to Miami University, which in Oxford, Ohio, is a wonderful, wonderful school, and just fell in love with education there. When I graduated in 2011 from Miami, and it was the peak recession. I had a social studies education degree, which there are so many social studies educators out there. It was pretty tough to find a job. And, I spent a lot of time up at Miami talking to their student teachers and really talked to them about that period of my life. Cause, I had a great GPA. I had a great resume. I was, president of the Miami Council for Social Studies, and just couldn't find a job because there weren't really any. And it just so happened that one day I came to my previous high school. I had to drop something off here, and my assistant principal at the time was then principal, and he said, hey, if you're subbing in the area, we have the need for a long-term sub in social studies. And I started the very next day, and that turned into a full-time job, and taught. I was in the classroom for I think 6 years before I started. My principal and the dean of students at the time really began pushing me into different roles in the school, whether that was like our safety team, whether it was leading professional development. And they then said, hey, you should really explore getting your master's in educational leadership and pursue administration. And, as a longtime teacher, I never wanted to be anywhere but the classroom. And it just so happened the University of Notre Dame has a program through the Alliance for Catholic Education called the Remick Leadership Program, which is specifically geared towards principals and administrators at Catholic schools. And Baden High School, where I'm at now, is a Catholic school, and the program really spoke to me. And thankfully, I was admitted to that program. And it's a national program for people all across the country. And we lived on campus for a month every summer, and then we took classes remotely. And it was a small cohort group. And after that first summer, I came back just so energized. I learned so much from my colleagues, my classmates up there. And, I began to see that the training I was going through there really inspired in me a love and a real desire to make change at a bigger level. I'm very fortunate to have worked under incredible leadership in my time here. And after I graduated from Notre Dame, I became an assistant principal for a few years before we transitioned to a president-principal model. And our former principal became president. I then was named the principal, and I'll be entering my fourth year as principal here in the next week. So I'm really excited for it.
Wonderful. I love that. And like sometimes things change, and with the serendipity, you never know where you're going, but actually life takes you where you want to go. Actually, so love the story. So Patrick, I was looking at the school numbers, and congratulations on like the school has seen really good growth in the last few years. So congratulations on that. Now, with that kind of growth, a lot of times there are obviously challenges to scaling, and I think the leadership change probably aligned with that to overcome some of those. So can you talk about some of those challenges and how you're looking at kind of addressing them? Yeah.
Yeah, and to put in perspective, when I first started teaching at Baden, we had 448 students. We'll be entering, and that was back in 2011, 2012. We'll be entering the 25-26 school year with just over 745 students. So it's a lot of growth. And the building that we're in, so there's, as you said, there's some challenges with growth. There's like the physical challenges themselves. Our building was built in 1966. When it was initially built, it housed almost 1,200 students. And as I tell people all the time, because, we're obviously adding additional spaces, and they always say, well, the school used to hold 1,200 people. Can't you still do that? Well, education's changed a lot since 1966. So the physical challenges is really just being, creative with spaces. We're fortunate to have a lot of classrooms, but we have made some changes within our school building to account for that growth. Everything from additional lockers to refurbishing some spaces that were previously offices into additional classrooms. One of the big challenges we have right now is that we have a number of teachers who are traveling. We have 4 of our full-time teachers, they're on the road, which is its own challenge for teaching. That not having a permanent classroom and kind of being more transient throughout the school day definitely brings about a different dynamic and different challenges. And we're very fortunate for those people that they welcome that challenge, and we try and make that transition as easy as possible. I think with the growth as well, we've put a lot of policies in place in regards to class sizes. Historically, our class sizes have always been around anywhere from 18 to 22 students. With the increased enrollment, our finance team, our president, our advancement team have really worked to ensure that every time we grow, we're adding teachers to it. So we're trying to make sure that class sizes don't get too big. So we cap all of our classes. The most students that teachers will have in any given class is 25. Our average across the school is 18.9. And it just really depends with electives and other things. Like there are some really small classes, but we've been very intentional in how we structure that. And even with our admissions process, never in a million years did I expect Baden to have close to 750 students. And, it's been, the beauty of that is that so many people want to come to Baden. And as a Catholic school, Catholic by its very definition means universal. We want all students to be able to come to Baden, but we're obviously constrained by space. So on the kind of the opposite end of that, we've been working with a group to develop a campus master plan for looking at some additions to the building to add that space so we can continue to grow in a manageable way.
Wonderful. So, and as you mentioned, right, that it's a faith-based school as well. So, and obviously there is like this whole new technology revolution that you may say. So, are there any things that you have to keep in mind while growing and making sure that the faith-based service programs are still able to build a collective purpose amongst the educators as you scale and grow?
Yeah, that we like being a Catholic school. So we're owned by the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. So I report up to that superintendent as well as the Archbishop. That we exist as a Catholic school, and that's the reason we exist. So that faith element is paramount above all else. We serve all of our students. About 70% of them are Catholic, but we have a growing non-Catholic population. And as we meet with them, discuss them, that our primary role is to really help them grow in their faith. They are going to participate in things like Mass, our service program, our retreat program. They have to attend religion class every day, but our fundamental goal is that students grow in their faith. And we have students from lots of different faith traditions, and to grow in their faith, whatever faith that may be. But they're obviously going to learn within the Catholic tradition as well. And there's a lot of carryover between faiths in terms of what they value, what they hold dear. And we speak often about our beliefs as a school community, specifically when it comes to, as we talk about technology policies, as we talk about, I always say all the noise in the outside world. We always make decisions and think about what we believe as a school community. Just by an example, like one of the beliefs we talk about a lot is that God made us for each other. And in a world that has become much more technology driven, that the world outside, it can be somewhat impersonal, that so much happens online, so much happens without seeing someone's face. Here in this building where, whether it's our cell phone policy, our AI policies, we want to expose students to certain things, but we always have to keep in mind that God's created us to be intentional with one another, to be present in each other's lives. And it can look a little different, like you and I right now are on opposite sides of the country. But, just being intentional with that time, I'm not sitting here on my phone while we're talking. And then like with teenagers nowadays, those are tough things. And as we get into this conversation, we'll probably get into some of those specific policies. But any decision we make, we're always talking about our mission as an institution, but then what we believe. So we developed belief statements. And as we talk about policies, as we talk about initiatives, those things happen, but they happen within the confines of what those belief statements mean for our community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually myself went to a Catholic school, and I so really totally hear when you say like most of the religions have a common theme, and one of the main things is actually seeing different perspectives as well, and then following through. So now moving to let's say we talked about you talked about a little bit about the class size and the growth and so on. Now, in terms of supporting teacher well-being, and things actually changed a lot during COVID and even now with like AI and so on. What do you see as like main stressors facing your faculty today, and how are some of the ways that you're addressing that?
And as you said, coming out of COVID, I feel like education changed entirely in terms of, what the capabilities of a school are. Like we learned very quickly, as a private institution, when you're quarantined, we're a tuition-based school. Why would people keep paying tuition if you're not physically in school? So we designed our asynchronous education platform, and those right when our governor came out and said, hey, schools are shutting down, we had to immediately begin developing how do we keep students learning? And really what stuck out is our teachers wanted so bad to still see their students. And, we used that desire, like right when we came back from COVID, we started back in August of 2020, back in person. And there was that initial, like, it was overwhelming, but they were so excited to be back with people again. But since then, there's, all the things we've talked about before in terms of our growing enrollment are things that are just Baden issues. But the nature of education has changed a lot for all teachers across all schools. So when it comes to us as like me as a school leader and then my administrative team, we talk often about what is our role with teachers. And the number one role is that of support. That, we still do evaluations, we still are doing classroom observations, but they're always done with the mindset that, we've hired our teachers. They are experts in their content area. They've been trained as teachers, that our primary role is that of support. So it's a lot of intentional conversations about, what their needs are as educators. And we have some platforms and avenues that teachers have here, whether it's our department chair meetings. We have a faculty council where they have some elected representatives meet with our administration and just talk about just general issues they're seeing, but always keeping those lines of communication open. As school leaders, being constantly visible in the school is one of the greatest ways to show that teacher support. every school has behavior issues, things like that pop up. But our role is, we want to address those right as they happen, as opposed to a note being sent to the office and then it being dealt with, a day from then. Is really being present to address those issues in real time. When it comes to, curricular support and specifically teaching support, being present in the classroom and giving feedback in real time is the best avenue for that. That a lot of administrators will wait until that formal eval to sit in a classroom and see what a teacher's teaching. We like to be present as much as we possibly can be. I won't lie to you and say that our job takes us a million different directions. We also, my assistant principals and I often talk about being the shield that kind of guards our teachers. That we, a lot of my interactions are with parents. I wish I could say that most of the time they're happy about everything that's going on, but a lot of times if they're calling me, usually something has happened where they're unhappy. And always being that first line of defense for our teachers is really, really important. For new teachers in particular, for teachers that are just starting in the profession, our assistant principal, dean of academics, designed something called a New Teacher Academy that we have all of our new staff go through, where we get them a substitute teacher for half the day. And we spend time with them once a month in our conference room where we have an agenda and things we talk about, but then it's really just time for them to talk about, what they're teaching, how things are going, and get feedback from not only their administrators, but then also their peers. Starting at any school is difficult. And especially for people that are new to the profession, if you look at those retention rates within the first couple of years of a teacher starting teaching, there's a high likelihood that they may not come back to teaching at all. And if, I don't know how well versed you are in, what's happened to many of our colleges and universities, but they're seeing less people going into the teaching profession. So our mindset across all things is really supporting our teachers at all times. And that support looks a lot different for a lot of our different teachers. Like some of our teachers, they might struggle with classroom management. So they may need, an administrator that, that tough class they have 6th period, just to sit in it for a day or two, just to give them feedback in real time, but then also to help to calm those students down a little bit. Some of our teachers, may be struggling with a particular lesson or unit plan that they want to try something new. And they're obviously going to get feedback from their assessment from the kids, but they also want feedback from an administrator and a teacher leader to give them feedback. Like, you may want to tweak this a little bit. That was really good, but maybe try this. That feedback is really, really important. So my mindset when it comes to teacher support is number one, being present. And number two, when it comes to, evaluating the actual art of teaching, is less focus on, those, everybody has kind of their rubric that, everybody wants to get a 4 in everything, but really having intentional discussions around support before you ever get to that point where you have to do a formal evaluation.
Yeah, you touched so many critical points. I would love to talk on a lot of them. So yeah, it's like talking about like the feedback that you actually give is so important, and also supporting different teachers because of the diverse nature of the experiences as well as backgrounds and so on. So yeah, it makes it significant. But it looks like you have a really amazing plan in there. And a system to help different levels of teachers. So that's great. Now, how are you as you see a lot of these AI tools and so on coming in? What role do you see like technology playing, and especially like AI now that you're seeing it everywhere in the classroom?
You asked that question. I immediately think of a meeting we had in, I think it was December of 2022, when ChatGPT really, that first version came out. And we'd heard about it from the student end that we had students using it to write some essays in English class. And we had a meeting right before exams, and that was a topic in the meeting. And like, this is a moment I wish I could take back. So we showed teachers what ChatGPT was. We inputted an essay question from one of our classes, and the teacher saw in real time what it produced, which incredible tool, but their first reaction was like, oh my gosh, all of our kids are going to be plagiarizing. They're going to be using this to write all their stuff. And for many of our teachers, that was their first interaction with the tool. So part of the work on our end was trying to take back that moment and really learn how to utilize the tool in different ways, in different fashions. So last summer, so this would have been 2024, my Dean of Academics and I, we took a large group of teachers to the ISTE conference, which is the International Society for Technology and Education, with really the main goal being with a focus on AI and policies for our school, but then also adopting a tool for usage as well. Because there's so many different things out there. And we have our technology department is always working on our web filter and like what's blocked, what's not, what do we allow students to use. So it was really a catch-all to have some really intentional discussions around it. So we spent time at that conference, and I was fortunate enough. There was a former colleague was working at the Google Gemini tent, so we got an in-depth look at Gemini, which is probably my preferred tool. But we also spent a lot of time with a group called Magic School. And are you familiar with Magic School at all?
Yeah, very much.
And our teachers that were there really responded well to it because of the different pieces it has specifically for teachers. And what we did in the 24-25 school year is really focused in on just teachers. That we have some teachers that are on the cutting edge of technology. And you're going to find this at any school, that are adopting and adapting in real time before anyone else. If you think of Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point, those early adopters, we have some staff that are right there. But then we have some other teachers that computers in general were a stretch for them, email, attaching documents, let alone the power that artificial intelligence has. So we actually had our teachers that went on that trip when we adopted Magic School as our platform. They actually led that training when we got back. We spent about a day and a half when we returned from summer break, where our teachers were trained on how to use Magic School. And what we did in that first year is really just focus in on teachers. How can teachers use this platform when we come back to burnout and some of the stressors on teachers to make their jobs easier is probably the wrong word, but maybe some shortcuts and when it comes to effectiveness in their role. And then we would have periodic meetings throughout the year and talk about different ways we're using it. So there were some teachers that really used it a lot for lesson planning, getting some different ideas where they'd plug a lesson plan in there and they'd ask for suggestions. There were some teachers that really liked using it to create handouts for some of the lessons they've already had, where it would pop something out and they would edit it to their liking. We had some teachers that began utilizing it to analyze assessment in particular, and that's really where the power of these tools come into play. But like behind all of this are like the specific school policies when it comes to student data being uploaded to a third-party platform, which not everybody thinks about when they're doing this in real time, that that's student data that we can't necessarily, there's some things without names we can upload. There's some things that can never be touched by an AI tool. And really learning that together in real time was in some ways a lot of fun. In some ways, it's still a big stress because we also, our goal is to have students on this platform as well and really begin to manage that, because we know our students are going to graduate from Baden and they're going to go to a college or university where AI is ubiquitous, that it's, they might have a professor that's telling them that, they can use it for pretty much anything they want. They might have a professor that says they can use it for giving them feedback on a paper or a research element, but that it should be their own original work. And I think that we as educators are all navigating this in real time and trying to figure out what's the best route for students. And, quite honestly, there's sometimes we're one-to-one with laptops at our school. And there's sometimes where I don't, I'd prefer the laptop not even be there because, students need to be interacting with material and curriculum without that technology present as well. So you're always walking that line of, what is best for students. And I'm honest with our staff that, right now, we don't know what the future holds. All we can do is really help prepare our students and expose them to different elements. So by the time they enter college or the workforce, they have a baseline knowledge. But as really focusing on this field, it's changing so rapidly and so quickly that it's hard to predict where it's going to go next.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you were initially talking about the Chat GPT moment, I think things were in early stages, like a lot of like wild, wild west, where there's this tool, everybody can actually use it. And now you're starting to see more kind of methodology around it in terms of purpose-built tools. You talked about Magic School. We're also doing something around assessments and so on. And so it's just like more focused and more in control, where you have such a powerful technology, and how you use it makes a big difference as well. Great. So you touched a little bit about on like student assessment and feedback. So let's move to that topic for a bit. So in terms of at Baden, what's generally the current process for like student assessment and feedback? Means we see schools which where means my son actually goes to a high school, and we see sometimes that it takes a long time for students to get feedback. So if you can talk a little bit about if there are any things that you see in the system which can be improved and so on related to that.
Are you asking about assessment specifically related, like using AI tools and things like that for assessment and feedback, or just in general?
In general, like what challenges might be there and today, and then how do you see, like, for example, technology helping with those kind of challenges?
Yeah, and it's so I always think about, I'm a former social studies teacher, and I relate a lot to English teachers. That I taught AP US history for a long time, and for anybody listening that's familiar with APUSH, like there's the DBQ and the LEQs, which are like these long handwritten essays. And now, thankfully, the College Board has switched to all being on a computer, so they're typing it out now. And I would have 80 students in AP US history, and they'd all write their DBQ, and then I was staring at a stack this high of all these different essays I had to grade. And that's like for any teacher that teaches writing, how important it is that students write it, but just as important, if not more important than the process of them writing it, is that feedback. So, our English department is incredible in how they teach the writing process, and not waiting till that end point where they turn in that final essay to give feedback. Probably about 7 or 8 years ago, our English department switched their methodology when it comes to writing feedback. That final essay is still important, but they are also doing individual feedback meetings throughout the writing process. And that looks a lot of different ways within our English classrooms and then our social studies classrooms as well, where it can be, peer feedback, or they review a rubric and they might be focusing just on that argument. What is the argument or thesis present there? And giving feedback directly on that. But our teachers really work one-on-one with students, and they'll take a day of class where, students are working with a partner to give some peer feedback, while a teacher's meeting one-on-one, giving that direct feedback in the moment. But it's really all about when you get that big stack of papers at the end, we don't want it being, 5 or 6 days before those students get that paper back in their hands. Because, what we've learned about assessment and really about feedback in general is feedback is best when it's quick. By the time students get those papers back, they've forgotten what they've even written sometimes. So giving that feedback in real time is very, very important. When it comes to using, our use of AI tools, a lot of times we'll have students, they'll begin to write something and use, Magic School or another AI tool to give them real feedback in that, and really learning that process. And they create something themselves, and then they'll input that into, we use Magic School, and they'll say that, here's a 12th grader in AP English literature. Here's the essay. Here's the prompt for the essay. Here's what I have so far. Like, what feedback do you have in terms of my argument or my use of evidence or my use of, some in-text citations based on my argument, to get that feedback from the tool. And that's been, not going to lie to you, a little scary at times, because you're relinquishing some control there. However, it allows that feedback those tools are often so intuitive that it's giving some really good feedback immediately. And they're still with it learning from the teacher directly. They're talking about how the tool can be used in a way that's not creating something that isn't theirs, but giving them feedback on something they've created in order to make it better. When it comes to more, standardized summative assessments, when we're looking at, a science classroom that's taking exam on a unit where it's a lot of, multiple choice, some short answers, our teachers look at that aggregate data that's showing a particular class and looking at, what standards they're hitting and where students really struggled. So part of that, I don't believe an AI tool will ever replace a teacher looking at, how students did on question number 5, and then looking back at their teaching and saying, I probably should have covered a little bit deeper on mitosis or whatever particular subject, or maybe I explained it a little bit differently than how I asked about it on a quiz or a test. So I think it's a constant, in order to be a very effective educator, you have to be constantly looking at your assessments, what they're measuring and how students are performing on it, while at the same time, this is why education is so difficult, reflecting on how you taught it in order for students to arrive at that answer. So I do think there's some elements of AI tools that can be helpful in that, but I don't believe it'll ever replace that reflective inquiry process for a teacher as they look at their assessment results.
Yeah, so true. And at the end of the day, right, they're just like tools to help teachers and both students, as you talked about. We also feel like I personally feel like that human element is so important that you can actually use AI as an assistant and so on, but eventually it's the teacher and those human interactions are what they are making a difference, that motivation level and so on and so forth. Great. So you talked about like learning loop. You talked about assessments as well. How are like teachers feeling? And you had earlier talked about the initial part, but in terms of like now you have some direction that you want to go into and have some tools that you've selected. So how are teachers feeling about adopting those tools and how is that going?
So I think the key for, if there are any administrators listening is really having open dialogue around it. That, when we began presenting on Magic School, there were, and just about adopting an AI tool, that there are some of your teachers are going to be really excited and gung-ho and like, this is great. And there are going to be some people that, resistance, the wrong word, but more of just questioning. And I think those questions are very healthy. Just given, over-reliance on certain technologies can be a very dangerous thing. So I think that our mindset when it comes to it is really chunking it out, that we didn't dive head first and say we're fully adopting something. Really begin training our teachers on how it can be used effectively. But even in that, brought up some really good conversation on the merits of it just in general. Like if we begin exposing students to AI, what if they become too reliant on it? What if, the fear from a lot of people is that when it comes to producing original work, will that go away? And it's always, as I mentioned earlier, walking that fine line of exposing students to these tools while at the same time still teaching the great things we've been teaching. If we can go back 200 years in education, that there's great processes that have stood the test of time that we don't want students to lose. So as I mentioned earlier, like, there are some times for our classrooms that, laptops aren't even out. Like we want students, handwriting notes. We want them handwriting papers. We want that original work still present. But then there are other times where we want them interacting with the curriculum in real time with a tool present as well. And, navigating those conversations can be very, very difficult. Like I'm thinking of one teacher in particular, Dr. Paulus, who I'll give him a shout out on here, is an incredible educator. He taught at the college level for a long time. And he brought up just some incredible questions of really just the merits of AI and bringing up, that over-reliance on a tool that really sparked a lot of discussion amongst our teachers and really led to them saying, this is a tool we can use, but we shouldn't become over-reliant on it. And I think what that's done is that that's definitely diffused into other elements of the school that we, are firmly committed to exposing students to different elements. But then at the same time, we want students to continue to create that original work. So it's we're constantly towing that line. But as a school, we're much more on not fully adopting something that students are using all the time and just having snippets in time. And that's I keep going back to magic schools. That's probably the beauty of that tool, is that we have a lot more controls over how students use it, as opposed to, just opening up an AI tool and they can use it however they want. So teachers are able to go in and tweak. They want to use this specific tool in this specific time period where they're working with students, but they don't have access to it when they're, actually writing their final paper.
Great. Yeah, exactly. Cool. So, yeah, so we talked a lot about how to adopt the AI tools. Now let's move into a little bit more a different topic, and especially related to your school in particular, where like you have a faith based school, and there's new technology that is coming in. So can you talk a little bit about like how do you ensure like the technology adoption aligns with the school's core mission and then faith based practices?
Yeah, and it's as I mentioned earlier, it starts kind of any adoption of any tool starts in one of two places. Either it's coming from our teachers through our department chairs, where they're meeting with our academic dean, or they're coming from our educational leadership team, which is the team I lead, which has our dean of students, our academic dean, but then also our campus minister, our director of Christian service, and then our technology director as well are all in there as well. And we often talk about, I mentioned this before, but that God made us for each other, that singular belief. And as we talk about technology tools in particular, we never want to lose the feeling that when students are here, we're present in the lives of others. And I'm going to use kind of a separate example that's a hot topic in Ohio right now, which are cell phones. So the state of Ohio passed a law that says schools have to have a cell phone policy that restricts cell phone usage. So we've never allowed cell phones on campus for students to be on them during the school day. But as all schools have seen, kids are on those phones all the time, and they find a way, whether it's in the back of class, underneath their pencil pouch, they'll have their laptop open and a phone sitting right there. So we spent a lot of time this summer. Our staff is reading The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. I don't want to get too off topic in terms of what we're talking about here, but our school approach is really to think deeply about these things, to involve prayer, discernment. And as we adopt new tools, we never want to deviate from what we believe as a school community. The Catholic Church has always been on the cutting edge when it comes to different technologies. And I think that there's a way that to coexist with those technologies, but it's never going to replace that interaction with one another. So when it came to the cell phone policy, we spent time with our kids talking about, what are the reasons that they want to be on their phones? There's a social element to it. There's a cool factor when it comes to whether it's Snapchat, TikTok, all those things. And those same principles can be applied to the technology we adopt within an educational setting. And it can feel at times somewhat restrictive for students. And when compared to other schools, we are more restrictive when it comes to what we allow students to be on, what we allow students to use. But the overall purpose is really that, when me as an administrator, as I'm walking the hallways, is I want to see kids interacting with one another. That there's a heavy emphasis on that personal invitation and those personal touches with each other, that we're constantly talking face to face. Well, at the same time, we want them learning about all these technologies and using them in a way guided by an educator, so that by the time they reach adulthood, by the time they graduate, that they have exposure to it. So it's a constant discussion, and that there are, we try and be very, very open with our faculty and staff and invite those conversations. Because if someone's having questions about it, or they're wondering, is this going too far? We want those questions to be able to be addressed in real time.
Yep, exactly. Cool. So now, uh, yeah, as mm, as you're integrating these practices and trying to scale as well, uh, how do you actually figure out like what resources to allocate to different initiatives and so on? Based on your overall goals, and how do you actually determine that resource allocation?
So, being at a private school, so we do get some funding from the state, from the state of Ohio, which we're very fortunate and thankful for. But our entire budget is really built off tuition. So when it comes to adopting a resource or really purchasing anything at all, the way that we think about it is that any dollar that we spend on anything could have been given to a student to help make Baden more affordable. Our tuition is over $13,000, and families sacrifice a lot in order to send their students to Baden. So when it comes to us adopting a tool, that's in the front of our minds, that we have to make sure that it's a tool that's, number one, is it effective? That anytime we're adopting a tool, that we want to call other schools that have used it, like, how are you using it? What are the issues that you've seen with it? And there's sometimes like that I've seen another school use something, and I'm like, man, that would really work well here at Baden. And we'll call some other schools, and then some questions will come to our mind, and we'll say, okay, maybe our teachers won't use it as effectively. Usually for any tool, we try and have a trial period where we'll have a teacher or 5 or 6 of them trial something out, and they'll work through some of the issues. So we might get an individual license for something. So that could be something like something as simple as a review game tool like GimKit, which is awesome. Where we'll have teachers try those out, and if it's something that we will then talk to our staff and say, is this something we want to adopt school wide? And what we found is that there's sometimes that we'll adopt something and it'll work well for 2 or 3 years, but then it's gotten a little stale and we'll have to switch to something different. But the process is really just talking about it intentionally, having calling references and really seeing how it's utilized in other schools, having a trial period where we test it out, and then constantly refining that. The best example I have is, are you familiar with e-hall pass at all, or like electronic hall passes for schools?
Yeah, I've heard of it actually. Yeah.
So one of our teacher complaints over the years is that we had students like in the hallway where they didn't have a pass to go from place to place. And like everybody, like some people had a lanyard they took in order to go to the bathroom. Some people would handwrite a note. Some people would not write a note at all. And we want to, obviously want to trust our students to not roam the hallways, but at any school it's going to happen. So we had adopted e-hall pass, and students were able to access it through their laptops, and there were issues with that. So we then switched to like a kiosk in every room, which in theory would work well, but it didn't always work perfectly. So then what we're going to this year is that they'll be able to do both. Is that after 2 years of adopting it, you constantly have to get that feedback from teachers where we never want to adopt something that's going to make everyone's life harder. Like, that's not the purpose of adopting these things. That it shouldn't. The tools we adopt should be making your job better. It should be making your job easier and more efficient, not creating extra work. So for any adoption process is really constantly asking for feedback, getting that feedback, and then responding to it. And schools sometimes move slow, and I'm guilty of this as well as an administrator. Is that it's hard at times to course correct when you've adopted something, but it's also, I think, a great sign of leadership to course correct in real time. That you try something out, everybody wanted to try it, it didn't work exactly as you thought it would, but having the ability to course correct in real time. It's the same thing that when you're teaching a lesson, students aren't responding super well to it, and your best teachers, they're able to pivot in real time to a different way of explaining it, a different way of doing it, in order for it to be more effective and to help the learning process.
Yep. Cool. So we're coming close to the end of the session. So let's go through like a lightning round, leadership and practice. So Patrick, do you want to share one word to describe your leadership style?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'd probably say vulnerability and support.
Great. A recent professional development book or article that influenced your thinking?
Well, I heard you said the anxious generation, so I feel like that. Um, Probably Start With Why by Simon Sinek.
Oh yeah. That's a really good one. Cool. Finally, what gives you hope about the future of education?
Here at Baden, I definitely say our teachers. Teachers are already underpaid, but working in a Catholic school, it's not about poverty like it used to be when it was, our priests and our sisters that were educating in our Catholic schools. But there is the financial element of teaching is definitely tough, but our teachers are remarkable in building relationships with students. And every day, as I pray, I'm just so thankful for the teachers we have in this building. And there are days as a principal that, it's tough. They can be very tough days. But what has always given me hope is our teachers. They come ready to go every day, and they're excited to be with those students. So those teachers definitely give me hope.
Yeah, shout out to all the teachers, wonderful teachers. Great. So as we come to the wrap up of another interesting episode, we talked about what it takes to scale educational institutions and the leadership practices that make that scaling a success. We also talked about how to support teachers and balance faith-based learning practices with student feedback, and also how to integrate AI into learning and assessment practices. So thank you so much, Patrick, for such a wonderful discussion. Have a story, question, or insight from your own classroom or campus? We would love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in to the Magna AI podcast. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube and learn more at magnaeducation.ai. Because when we support teachers with the right tools, we unlock what's possible for every learner.